government are reportedly considering whether to up the two-child limit on universal credit and allow parents to claim for each of their eldest 3 children. Now, this will make an extra child eligible. It could see parents received an extra £292 a month. According to the Resolution Foundation, that could lift around 280,000 children out of poverty. The policy could also calm, a brewing Labour rebellion over wider benefit cuts. But it would cost the government around £2.5 billion. Nelufar, the political side of this, which I think we should acknowledge, is that this is a subject where Keir Starmer could possibly face his first defeat in the House. Plenty of Labour MPs unhappy at the proposed cuts to PIP payments, and the two-child benefits been massively, the two-child limit, I should say, has been massively unpopular with Labour MPs. So is this the government saying, well, we need to appease some of the people in the party so we don't lose the votes in Parliament?
I think Prime Minister Starmer, is right to be worried about this. I think he does have a backlash on the backbenchers who are sitting there waiting to see how he's going to play this out. Offering a 3-child cap rather than a 2-child cap might seem frivolous or silly, but let's think about all those parents who are in work, who have had their child tax credit and child benefit removed and are now dealing with the added issues of cost of living crisis, the inflation that we've gone through. You're talking about a bunch of people, parents, who are in work. These are not people who are sitting at home claiming benefits, who have been hit hardest by this. I think more than the politicking of it all, if we take that to one side, we have 4 million kids who are living in near poverty. Anything to stop that is a good thing. OK, look, we're going to hear what Mike says, and we're going to be hearing from you as well. We're going to take a quick break to our debate whether parents on benefits should get more money to spend on their children. Should they be allowed to claim for a 3rd child instead of just the 2, the 2-child limit cap that we have at the moment? 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need to let me know your thoughts. Mike, what's your view on that?
Well, you know, I believe in people standing on their own 2 feet. I don't like them to have to rely on the state too much. The welfare bill in this country is 350 billion quid already. That is enormous.
There's a pension.
There's an enormous amount of waste within it. And also, when we use statistics like 4 million children near to the poverty line in this country, I don't believe that. We're a very generous country with a great welfare state, and poverty is relative. I can tell you that children in this country are very well looked after compared to many other countries in the world. No, I am saying that.
You're comparing them to Sudanese children.
And so I'll get to the crucial point. I do not think you extend the cap from 2 children to 3 children. I think if you're going to have children and start a family, then you have to make provisions to bring those children up and not rely on the state. I do not believe on the state getting more and more involved in people's lives. They should be getting less involved, not more.
Mike, these are people who work. These are people who have jobs. These are people who might not be able to make ends meet because of the cost of living crisis, because rent has increased, because food is more expensive.
Yes.
We're not talking about billions and billions and billions of pounds.
We all have the same problem with that.
No, listen.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, sure.
This number isn't a joke. We have increased case of rickets, of jaundice amongst young populations. We've had a pandemic that rendered them utterly unable to cope with what was going on in the real world. And now you're asking to remove this tiny subsidy to help them get out of poverty?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I am, because once you start relying on the state to start the lives of children, it goes on forever and people become dependent on the state. My mum had 3 children in 3 years. I'd never had a penny's help from the state because my mother and
Why should people in 2025 live to the standards of your mum in the 70s?
To start a family, well, it was the 50s, actually.
50s, I was being generous.
Children up, yeah.
Do you not think that there is an element of parental responsibility? So to look and say, look, we've got 2 kids, look at our finances. Perhaps we can't afford to have a 3rd child, or perhaps we can't afford to have a 2nd child. Do you not think that there is an element of parental responsibility when making those decisions?
You're talking to a child-free person. I have never to have children. However, for those that do have kids, for the children that are still here, our priority has to be, as a nation, to make sure our children have the best start in life. This is proven without... The Resolution Foundation has done the numbers. It is proven indefatigably that giving this benefit to one more child will stop them from facing poverty. Why is this a bad idea? I cannot understand this.
Depends on your definition of poverty, honest to God, it does. I mean...
How about having 3 hot meals a day, which is what we're talking about? That's one of the definitions of child poverty, that you cannot eat every time a meal is expected.
What I don't get is a government overtaxes the working population, but then says we're going to give some of that back to children in welfare benefits. I'd much rather have a society where people kept more of their money and then could say, you know, man and woman, we're going to start a family because we can afford it from the income that we earn. We don't give as much to the state as the state wants. That's the way to do it.
But is there a problem, though, Mike, that you know, and these are the stats from the DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, that almost 60% of the people who claim those benefits are actually in work.
They're in work.
These are people who are not sitting around... you know, relying on benefits.
No,
These are people who are going out to work, but they're not being paid enough to put food on the table.
Well, what you have a problem with is low wages. That's what you have a problem with.
I'm sorry. Again, I say, if you shape society properly, people will be able to bring up their children and pay for them themselves without needing the help of the state. And when you say they're in work, I've worked in journalism for 50 years, and everywhere you look, people have had to get childcare. They've had to make provisions for childcare.
Mike,
they decide to go out to work. They have to find somebody to look after their children.
We would never take the pension away from the elderly, would we? Because that's wrong. Because we
take winter fuel payments away from the elderly.
Well, we would never take the pension away from old people because we know it's wrong. So we would never go to an office and be like, well, why didn't you save enough? You knew you were going to get old. Where's your retirement money? Yet we expect young people to face poverty because they don't vote.
Pensioners have paid for their pension all their life.
Let's pause there. Let's pause there and hear from people at home. Hillary's in West Yorkshire. Hillary, welcome to the show. Do you think it would be a good idea? Do you think they should raise the limit to at least 3 children?
I'm furious. I agree entirely what Mike says. It's parent responsibility. You know if you can afford children. It's rubbish about poverty. I know people work and it's a struggle, but they're spending the money on the wrong things. I had my first son in 1968. I didn't get any child benefit till 1979. I've worked for 52 years at 3 jobs, not spent beyond my means, never owed anybody any money. Nobody's knocked at my door that I owe money. My rent's being paid, food's being on the table, and this about rickets. The fresh fruit and veg that's available for next to nothing in the supermarkets, it's the parents' responsibility to feed them. I am sick to death of parents complaining, I don't have time to feed them, I can't get them breakfast, I can't do this, I can't potty train. I'm furious, and I agree with what Mike said.
Nelufar.
Parents should take responsibility.
Nelufar, what do you make of what Hillary's saying? It's the parents' responsibility that if you cannot afford, perhaps, to have kids, then you shouldn't be having kids, is what
Hillary lived in a time that was really difficult. She brought up, clearly, Hillary, you've brought up your kids and lived a life within your means, and that is admirable. That is the goal. Not everyone is able to do what you do, Hillary. Simply not. And we're talking about the most poor, the most in need, the most destitute. Not everyone has your resolve, your ability to do that and to do it in the way that you did. Should we be turning children away because they don't have parents as good as yours? Think about the children in this situation, not about the parents. All right, if you want to berate the parents, you're within your rights to do so. But why should a child go hungry because their parents have made a bad decision? I just don't understand it.
Okay, Hillary?
Well, I'll tell you why. They get enough money, but they're spending it on the wrong things. They can feed the children. The priorities are honestly dead wrong of what they do. I mean, I had 2 boys. I had one in 1968 and one in 1978. I've been a single parent twice, been widowed twice. I have never relied on benefits at all.
Okay.
And I'll tell you something. It has been tight at times, but my children have been fed. And I didn't rely on benefits or get any benefits.
Hillary, thank you. Thank you. I'm only leaving it there because I want to hear from some more people waiting to speak to us. But great call to start us off, Hillary. Thank you for getting in touch. Sophie is in Berkshire. Sophie, welcome to the show. What are your thoughts? Do you agree with Hillary?
Yeah, I think that the two-child gap is suitable. I think it's more important that we think about where we put our money, and the government needs to think about the mental health aspect and putting more money into the health system and the NHS, because the more help and support people get, there's less likely for money to be spent on other things. And, maybe put more money in food banks. So open up more food banks so there is actually food available. And that would be one way of dealing with it.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Nelufar, what are your thoughts on that?
Resources are tight, times are hard, mental health services are depleted beyond imagination. I've been on a waiting list to see someone for 3 years. I fully get what you're saying, Sophie, but food banks aren't subsidised by the government. Those are run by charities and NGOs like the Resolution Foundation. Here's one important thing. If you have kids who are sick, they're going to cost the taxpayer over their lifetime far more than if you have kids who are healthy.
Mike, what do you say on that?
Well, then parents have a responsibility to bring their children up healthily. The lady we had from Yorkshire who said, I'm getting benefits, that some people take parental responsibility very seriously, and others think, do you know what? I'm going to rely on the state to help me here. And if it extends to 3, when will it extend to 4?
Okay,
it's not good enough.
I'm sure that many will agree with what you're saying, but do we have to also take into account the fact that things like getting on the housing ladder, rents, childcare, everything has become much more expensive.
Yeah.
Society is slightly different than it was a few decades before, where perhaps you could leave kids with people who were at home, perhaps people who weren't working. Now you don't have that luxury. We have some of the most expensive childcare in Europe.
Yes.
So how are you expecting parents to hold down the 2 or 3 jobs, pay for childcare, and make sure their kids don't go hungry?
I agree, everything's getting more expensive, but you've got to agree, compared to the 50s, where my mother had her children, myself and 2 sisters, society is much, much wealthier than it was in the 50s. There's an incredible wealth in this country now. We've just got to use it properly.
Mike.
And it's not using it properly to give parents a cop-out in bringing up their children by letting the state do it.
The child benefit and the child tax credit only comes into effect for every child for a certain amount of time. That's now gone. You have universal credit. When you cap it at 2 kids, if a person's wealthy enough, it doesn't affect them. It's only the poor that need that £3,000 a year. They are the ones who are slipping into poverty. Please don't say as a country we're wealthy, because all of that money is stuck at the top.
Let's pause there. Danielle's in West Sussex. Danielle, welcome to the show. Do you think that the 2-child caps should rise to 3?
It's a hard one. I can't really comment too much on that because I've only got 1 child at the moment. And that is hard enough for me and my husband both work full time.
Right.
And childcare for us at the moment, for me to go back to work, is about £2,000 a month.
That's ludicrous. My God.
I mean, that's a lot of
salary.
money.
Yeah, it is a lot, but that's the responsibility of parents. I mean, look, I admire you enormously for saying, you and your husband, it's going to be tough, but we're going to bring a child up, and you put £2,000 aside a month so you can both work and bring up your child. That is utterly commendable. And I wish if everybody else had the same attitude and the same approach to it, Danielle, we'd be a much, much better country, honest to God. Congratulations to you.
Danielle, do you feel you're getting enough help from the government?
We only recently just had to ask for a bit of help because it's impossible. My son's on special formula that we don't get prescriptions for, so that costs us about £110 a month alone just for his formula, not to take in feed, nappies, clothing. Like it's tough at the moment. The cost of living is so expensive. It's almost impossible to go back to work and earn a living.
Danielle, thank you. And I hope we speak again. Just on a little note, I sort of made just before we came on air. 1963, the birth rate in this country was 2.88 children. So people were having between 2 to 3 children. That was in 1963. In 2023, it's fallen to 1.4, just above 1 child. Yeah. And that, of course, then has a serious repercussion on numbers, on needs of people coming in to do jobs, social care, etc., etc. If we're not having enough people in the country, that, of course, has the impact of immigration.
Are you suggesting that number's dropped because people can't afford to have children?
Yes.
I don't know. It's dropped. It's dropped.
I think it's a completely different approach to society where people are getting much older before they get married and then decide not to have children.
Okay.
I don't think it's anything to do with cost.
I don't know what it's to do with, but it was fascinating to see how big that drop has been.